Welcome. We understand the amount of information that is coming is overwhelming, and we appreciate everything that all of you are doing to continue to support our 6 million students in California. My name is Stephanie Gregson. I'm the Chief Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction here at the California Department of Education. And the purpose of this webinar is to bring our most recent federal waiver to life. This is a very complex topic that has a lot of overlapping pieces, and therefore the main objectives of today are: 1, to share what our preliminary authorization from the United States Department of Education has granted us through this federal funding flexibility waiver. 2, to highlight the purposes and allowable expenditures of the title funds so that you can plan how you might use these funds to respond to the needs of your students and schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 3, explain the flexibilities that the Department of Education is granting California. 4, to make sure that all of you are connected to our individual program offices who are here to support all of you as you plan to meet the needs of your students in this time of uncertainty. We do not have all of the answers of the how and when today. However, we at CDE are working around the clock with staff from our State Board of Education, the Governor's Office, and the Department of Finance to finalize California's plans in light of these new federal funding flexibilities. Today's webinar will highlight the following topics: background on the federal waivers, the titles and programs that are being granted funding flexibility. We ask that all of you please type your questions into the chat on Zoom, and for those that are watching on Facebook Live, please email your questions to ESSA, that's ESSA, at cde.ca.gov. We're using these questions to inform the comprehensive FAQs that we are working on completing now to post onto our program web pages. The FAQs will also be sent out through our program's listservs, the ESSA listserv, and will be linked to CDE's COVID-19 webpage. We at CDE are honored to serve as your partners as we all work together to ensure that each and every one of our 6 million students in California receive the services and supports that they need to succeed. Please let us know what we can do and what you need so that we can all fulfill this very important mission. And now I'd like to introduce our Federal Policy Liaison, Joseph Sines, who will walk you through the background on our federal waivers.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. My name is Joe Sines, and I'm the Federal Policy Liaison for the California Department of Education. So just to start off, I will provide you with a background of the CARES Act and also California's assessment and accountability waiver. So the big two pieces for the CARES Act for the Department of Education is the $30.75 billion in emergency education funding to governors, state educational agencies, and institutions of higher education. But the purpose we're here for is the secretarial waiver authority under which the U.S. Department of Education can waive certain provisions due to the COVID-19 emergency. So previously on March 26, 2020, the California State Board of Education and the CDE requested a waiver for California's assessment and accountability standards. We received formal approval from the U.S. Department of Education for this waiver on March 27, 2020. This waiver covers statewide assessment, accountability, and reporting requirements in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act for the 2019-2020 school year. But today's waiver we're discussing is the federal funding flexibility waiver, as we're calling it. The waiver invitation was extended to states on April 3rd, 2020. The waiver request was submitted by the State Board of Education and CDE on April 10th, 2020, and we received preliminary approval on April 13th and final approval on April 22nd. So from a high level, the purposes of this waiver we are referring to when we say federal fiscal year 2018 funds, this is the federal fiscal year that runs from October 1st through September 30th. So the topics under this waiver from a high level, which my colleagues will be going over, are the Title I Part A carryover funds, the extended period of availability of federal fiscal year 2018 funds, Title IV Part A funding flexibility, and also the waiving of the definition of professional development. In applying for this waiver, the state of California has to assure that it will use and ensure that its subgrantees use funds under the respective programs in accordance with the provisions of all applicable statutes, regulations, program plans, and applications not subject to these waivers. We will work to mitigate and ensure that its subgrantees work to mitigate any negative effects, if any, that may occur as a result of the requested waivers. Also, we will provide the public and LEAs with the opportunity to comment on this request by posting information regarding the waiver request and the process for commenting on the state website. So the website can be found on our ESSA webpage, which is linked below. Also, public comment can be emailed to us at essa@cde.ca.gov. Also, any questions can be sent there. Now I will pass it over to the director of our Improvement and Accountability Division, Lindsay Tornatori, so she can discuss the flexibilities for Title I, Part A.
Good morning. My name is Lindsay Tornatori, and I want to first address the federal funding flexibility waiver as it addresses Title I, Part A funds. As Joe mentioned, there are two ways that Title I, Part A funds are addressed in this waiver: carryover and closeout. So first we will discuss carryover, and then later on I will come back and explain the closeout flexibilities that are provided in this waiver. For federal fiscal year 2019 funds, this waiver allows LEAs to carry over more than 15% and waives the limitation of carryover more than once every 3 years for Title I, Part A funds. Federal fiscal year 2019 funds are funds that will become carryover funds on September 30th, 2020. However, I want to point out that while the 15% cap of carryover and the time period of which carryover can take place have been waived for this one federal fiscal year, the purpose and allowable activities under Title I, Part A have not changed. Later on in these slides, we have a link to our CDE webpage and a complete list of allowable activities under Title I, Part A that we will highlight. The Title I Program Office can answer specific questions. Please contact us by email at title1@cde.ca.gov. And now I'll turn it back over to Joseph.
So this waiver contains flexibility for the General Education Provisions Act, or Gappa, as it's more commonly known as. Under this flexibility, the availability of federal fiscal year 2018 funds are extended another year. So instead of these funds closing out on September 30th, 2020, they now are being extended to September 30th, 2021. The next two slides will show a list of the funds that fall under the Gappa flexibility. So Title I, Part A of the ESEA, Title I, Part B of the ESEA, Title I, Part C, Title I, Part D, Subparts 1 and 2, Title II, Part A, Title III, Part A, Title IV, Part A, Title IV, Part B, Title V, Part B, Subpart 2, and the McKinney-Vento Education for Homeless Children and Youth Program. So my colleagues will highlight some of the title funds just mentioned. Now back to Lindsay.
Thank you. So mentioned earlier for Title I, Part A, this waiver offers flexibility around carryover, and now we will discuss the flexibility associated with closeout of Title I, Part A funds as per the extension of the period of availability per the Gappa that Joe just explained. So a visual to track where we are, on the left side in the blue box, for federal fiscal year 2019 funds, this waiver provides carryover exceptions seen here on the left. And for federal fiscal year 2018 funds, this waiver provides an extension of the period of availability of these funds. The 2018 federal fiscal year funds would typically close out on September 30th, 2020, but instead they will close out on September 30th, 2021. So now that we have distinguished the differences between the carryover and closeout flexibilities, we want to pause and remind everyone that the purpose of Title I, Part A funds and the authorized usage of these funds has not been waived and it has not changed. The purpose and requirements of using these funds is still the same and is to support the effective, evidence-based educational strategies that close the achievement gap and enable students to meet California's academic state content standards. Title I, Part A should continue to be used to improve basic programs operated by LEAs by consulting with teachers, principals, pupil services personnel, administrators, other staff and parents, and coordinating with other programs under this act as listed here on this slide. A complete list of authorized usage of Title I Part A funds can be found on our CDE website, which is the link is listed here on the slide. The U.S. Department of Education has granted California flexibility around carryover of fiscal year 2019 Title I Part A funds and closeout of federal fiscal year 2018 funds. Specific questions about California's Title I Part A funds are managed by two different program offices at the CDE. General questions about Title I Part A funds, use of funds, and technical assistance questions can be directed to the Federal Reporting Programs Office, and their email address is title1@cde.ca.gov. Under the ESSA, California reserves 7% of our Title I Part A funds to fund LEAs who are eligible for Comprehensive Support and Improvement funds, otherwise known as CSI. Questions regarding CSI funds and planning timelines should be directed to the School Improvement and Support Office, and their email address is siso@cde.ca.gov. So to conclude this section of funding flexibility for Title I Part A, I would like to reiterate one last time that California was granted a waiver under the Gappa that extends the period of availability of Title I Part A, inclusive of CSI funds, to September 30th, 2021. For CSI funds, the 2018 CSI funds, I want to share that grant reporting timelines are being extended to accommodate the additional time that LEAs have to expend these funds. CDE is building out the GMART system to accommodate this expansion of fund availability. More information will be shared with our LEAs that are impacted by this flexibility in the coming weeks. Please remember to put your questions about Title I Part A into the chat of our webinar, and please do not hesitate to contact us at the Title I or CISO email addresses with individual questions. The CDE will be providing guidance posted onto our program web pages and sent through our listservs within the coming weeks on how we plan to make these funds available given these funding flexibilities. We will use the questions that you have put into the chat in Zoom today to inform our FAQs to ensure that all of your questions are being answered in a timely manner. So similar to the closeout flexibility that is granted to our federal fiscal year 2018 funds for Title I Part A, the same flexibility has been granted to Title I Part D. The Title I Part D funds are funds that are dedicated to providing prevention and intervention programs for children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk. And the purposes of these funds or allowable activities have not changed. Since California has been granted the waiver to extend the period of availability for federal fiscal year funds of 2018, extended to September 30th, 2021, the CDE will be providing additional guidance, again, posted on our program web pages, sent through our listservs within the coming weeks. Please, again, similar to Title I Part A, put your questions regarding Title I Part D funds into the chat, and we will use them to inform our FAQs that we'll be sharing very soon. And so now I would like to turn this over to my colleague, Barbara Murchison, Director of the Educator Excellence and Equity Division.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thanks to all of you who are with us this morning. I hope that you and yours are well, and I want to let you know how much we appreciate everything you're doing to support California students during this challenging time. As Lindsay mentioned, I'm Barbara Murchison. I'm Director of the Educator Excellence and Equity Division, and here to share with you some information about flexibility around Title II Part A this morning. So a quick review, the purpose of Title II Part A is to provide grants to state educational agencies and subgrants to local educational agencies to increase student achievement consistent with challenging state academic standards, to improve the quality and effectiveness of teachers, principals, and other school leaders, to increase the number of effective teachers, principals, and other school leaders, and to provide low-income and minority students greater access to effective teachers, principals, and other school leaders. As you know, there are many different appropriate uses of Title II Part A. An LEA that receives a subgrant under Title II Part A shall use the funds made available through the subgrant to develop, implement, and evaluate comprehensive programs and activities in accordance with the purposes of Title II and that address the learning needs of all students, including children with disabilities, English learners, and gifted and talented students. The intention of the flexibility waiver is to maintain the purpose of Title II Part A while providing allowances to LEAs to address issues directly related to COVID-19. United States Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos announced funding flexibilities to best meet the needs of students and educators during the COVID-19 national emergency. These new flexibilities, authorized under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, allow schools to repurpose existing kindergarten through grade 12 education funds for technology infrastructure and teacher training on distance learning, among other flexibilities, in order to move resources to areas of highest need during this national emergency. The CARES Act, which was signed into law by President Trump on March 27th, now allows states and school districts to devote more of their federal resources to technology infrastructure, to support distance learning for students, and for professional development of teachers who are teaching remotely, many for the very first time. Section 8101(42) of the Every Student Succeeds Act defines professional development. The term professional development means activities that are an integral part of school and local educational agency strategies for providing educators, including teachers, principals, other school leaders, specialized instructional support personnel, paraprofessional, and, as applicable, early childhood educators, with knowledge and skills necessary to enable students to succeed in well-rounded education and to meet the challenging state academic standards. Very important, Section 8101(42) defines professional development activities as those that are sustained. So not standalone, not one day, not short-term workshops. They should be sustained, intensive, collaborative, job-embedded, data-driven, and classroom-focused. We all know that these attributes, the evidence shows that professional development that is aligned to this definition is most likely to improve student outcomes. The definition of professional development includes a detailed description of how professional development activities should be part of LEA planning, aligned with educational goals developed from input from all stakeholders, address the needs of all students, including English learners and students with disabilities, incorporate how technology can be used to support instruction, be evidence-based, be planned to support challenging state academic standards and address how students learn, and include support for educators to communicate with parents and families. So that is the definition in ESSA of professional development. But with this waiver, the definition of professional development, Section 8101(42), has been waived. As LEAs transition to distance and online learning, educators may need professional development on techniques for effective use of technology to provide instruction. Such professional development is an allowable use of Title II Part A funds. By waiving the definition of professional development, LEAs will be able to conduct time-sensitive, one-time, standalone professional development focused on supporting educators to provide effective distance learning, something we're all working to get better at every day. Technology purchases allowable under Title II Part A funds include expenditures to support distance learning training. Purchases are permissible for teachers, principals, and other school leaders for training purposes, but not for classroom use. Purchases for students are not an allowable use of Title II Part A program funds. However, LEAs may transfer up to 100% of their Title II Part A funds to Title IV Part A, under which technology purchases for students are allowable. And Lindsay will be talking a little bit more about some of how the waiver has affected the use of Title IV Part A funds. So I want to reiterate, you can purchase technology for training of your educators using Title II Part A funds, but may not use Title II Part A funds to purchase equipment for students. As Joe mentioned, California was granted a waiver of Section 421B of the General Education Provisions Act, or the Gappa. This extends the period of availability of 2018 fiscal year funds for Title II Part A to September 30th, 2021. The United States Department of Education is working on providing additional information on the period of availability for 2019 fiscal funds, but for now, only the 2018 funds have received this extra year of period of availability. So I want to reassure you before I turn this over to my colleague, Dr. Aguila, I want to reassure you that the Educator Excellence and Equity Division team is continuing to work hard to provide you with information regarding quality professional learning opportunities. And we have a team right now working on developing guidance on how to develop and deliver quality professional development virtually. To stay informed, I encourage you to use some of the resources listed on this slide. Check out our web pages, join our listserv, and follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @CaliforniaProfLearning. And if you have any questions about how to use Title II Part A, please don't hesitate to send us an email at title2@cde.ca.gov. As Lindsay mentioned, if you put your questions in the chat right now, that is really helpful to us in developing FAQ that will help us get all of your questions answered in a timely manner. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Veronica Aguila, who will share information regarding Title III, I did Title II, Title III Part A, and Title I Part C. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for all that you do to provide services to English learners, immigrant students, and migratory students and their families. And I hope you are staying healthy and safe in this particular time. I'm Veronica Aguila, Director of the English Learner Support Division, and will be addressing Title III and Title I Part C. Much of what my colleagues have stated will be restated here, but let's start with Title III Part A. Next slide. As you know, the purpose of Title III Part A is to provide supplemental funding for programs and services to English learners, their teachers, parents, and communities to support students to learn English and, as appropriate, another language. Title III can be used for dual language programs, bilingual programs, and any other program that's teaching students in a second language, and to meet the academic achievement goals. The Title III funded programs and services are supplemental in nature and supplement local, state, and other federal funds for which English learners qualify. This fund supplement Title I funds and LCAP concentration funds for English learners. Immigrant program funds under Title III specifically target students new to U.S. schools. These funds are used for program and services to assist students and their families to integrate into the American society and to help them acclimate to the U.S. environment. For example, addressing trauma caused by their migration and certainly by COVID-19. Supplemental professional development provided within Title III funds should be designed to make long-lasting permanent changes in classrooms, and even virtual classrooms, as we are experiencing distance learning, that will continue to support English learners and are supplemental to other federal and state professional development programs offered by the local education agencies. Remember, my colleague Barbara just mentioned Title II Part A can be used for distance learning professional development for teachers and those are also teachers of English learners. Title III is to supplement those efforts. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. And as previously stated by my colleagues, California was granted a waiver of Section 421B of the General Education Provisions Act, as we know it as Gappa. The waiver applies to Title III, Part A, and includes English learners and immigrant funds. The waiver extends the period of availability of the 2018 fiscal year funds for Title III, Part A, English learner and immigrant funds to September 30th of 2021. This will provide local education agencies an extra year to spend the 2018 funds on allowable Title III activities. And you know we have a webpage where you can see all the allowable activities on our CD webpage. And as Lindsay mentioned, more information will be forthcoming on how reporting will occur within our system. Next slide. As a reminder, the local education agencies already have the flexibility built into every Student Succeeds Act to braid funds to be able to do more. For example, if the local education agency wishes to transfer their Title II funds into Title III, they may do so. However, the purpose of both Title II and Title III must be accomplished, but this may be a good time to look at braiding those funds. Similarly, Title IV can be transferred into Title III as long as both Title IV and Title III purposes are addressed within the Title III program and services offered. In this age of digital divide, keeping in mind that this braiding is available is important. We want to provide the services that English learners, immigrant students, and migratory children need. Now, the restrictions for Title III prevail. Title III cannot be transferred to other titles. Title III funds must be used for the purpose of enhancing programs for English learners. And we know that is needed because more equity is needed for English learners. Next slide. Now I will transition to address Title I, Part C. Next slide. Title I, Part C is mainly known as the migratory program. As a reminder, Title I-C, or the Migrant Education Program's purpose, is designed to support high-quality supplemental and comprehensive educational programs for migratory children ages 3 to 21, and to help reduce the educational disruption and other problems that result from repeated moves for eligible migratory students and their families. Remember, migratory students' definition for this federal program is that they move with their families to follow the crops or fishery or lumber. These are the families that provide the food on our table, and this extra additional supplemental federal fund is really targeted to be the cherry on top above all other supplemental programs. The supplemental services provide academic, health, and other resources. Again, Title I, Part C is supplemental to all other state and federal funds. All other funds should be used to serve migrant children because migratory children are first students and they have severe disruption to their schooling as they move around district to district or state to state. Next slide. As previously mentioned, the flexibility waiver extends the period of availability funds for the migratory program until September 30th of 2021. The English Learner Support Division will provide separate guidance on the federal flexibility to the 15 migrant regions and the 5 direct funded districts. We are holding weekly webinars with our migrant directors. Similarly, we're holding weekly webinars with our BCN, Bilingual Coordinators Network, which includes our top 15 districts as well as liaisons from every county that provide that information throughout the state. We will continue those efforts to provide timely information to everyone. Next slide. I want to remind everyone that information is on our website on the Title III Part 8 and Migratory Title 1C guidance. It's available at the CDE webpage. We have added a newsletter for English learners that can be disseminated throughout the state with resources, as well as a parent newsletter that's translated into the top 5 languages. We know parents also need additional resources for internet connectivity, and this is the webpage where you can find that information. We also encourage you to join our listserv if you want the newsletter delivered to your email directly, and follow us on Twitter. Again, our email is elsd@cde.ca.gov. And for any COVID-19 questions, as previously mentioned, please do use COVID-19 email. Now, I would like you to welcome back Lindsay Torrentori to address Title IV. I'm sorry, Title V.
So we're going to, oh, there we go. I was going to say we're going to do a slight pause while it switches back over from Veronica's view to the CDE boardroom where we are. So as that's transitioning, so Title V Part B. I'm here now to highlight 2 more programs, the 2 last programs we're going to highlight today that have been given the same flexibility to spend their fiscal year 2018 funds of that extra year. So Title V and the McKinney-Vento education funds for homeless children and youth. First, Title V Part B. Title V Part B, which are the funds that support the Rural Education Achievement Program, or REAP, are also addressed in this federal funding flexibility waiver. And what we have on this slide is the purpose of Title V Part B funds, because similar to the other titles, the purpose and allowable activities under these funds have not changed. You can see that the Title V Part B is to be used to address the unique needs of rural school districts that frequently lack the personnel and resources needed to compete effectively for federal competitive grants, and also receive formula grant allocations in the amounts too small to be effective in meeting their intended purposes. Of course, under Title V Part B, LEAs may use these funds on the following activities: Title I Part A, Title II Part A, Title III, Title IV, and parental involvement activities. And for flexibility of Title V, California, again, was granted the waiver of Section 421B of the General Education Provisions Act, or the Gappa, which extended the period of availability of our 2018 federal fiscal year funds for Title V Part B to be used through to September 30th, 2021. With additional questions, please contact the Federal Programs Reporting Office at reap@cde.ca.gov. And the second program, the final program that we will highlight under this same provision of the waiver of the Gappa of the extra fiscal year to spend funds, is the McKinney-Vento Education for Homeless Children and Youth Funds. These funds are used to provide grants to facilitate and enhance the identification, enrollment, attendance, and success in school for homeless children and youth. These funds should be used to remove any barriers to education that the homeless child, youth, or family might have, including school supplies, including distant learning needs. Counseling and domestic violence referrals, coordination between schools and community agencies, and at the last resort, assistance with housing. For our current McKinney-Vento recipients, as you know, 2018 funds have been allocated and expended during the 2018-19 school year. The CDE is currently working with the Department of Finance regarding these funds, and the Homeless Education Program will contact you once we finalize how we will be moving forward regarding carryover from these 2018 funds. But I would like to please pause and remind everyone that all LEAs are required to implement the provisions of the McKinney-Vento Act, regardless if an LEA receives these supplemental grant funds or not. LEAs can always use state, local, and federal funds to support and serve students who are experiencing homelessness. Please contact the Homeless Education Program by email for further information, guidance, resources, and support. And their email address is homelessed@cde.ca.gov. And now I'll turn it back over to Joe.
Okay, and just to clarify, the U.S. Department of Education has also invited states to apply for a separate waiver to extend the Perkins Act and Adult Education and Family Literacy Act funding grants. So on April 16, 2020, the ED sent out the invitation. So just to let everyone know, this is a separate grant that isn't covered in the waiver we're talking about currently. The California Department of Education will have more information on this separate waiver in the very near future.
Hello again. Okay, so you probably are all noticing, if you're playing along at home, that we are going out of order, numerical order of our titles. And it's not to confuse anyone, but it's because Title IV Part A has additional flexibilities that the other titles do not. So we want to make sure that we're making a very clear distinction between Title IV Part A, what is being waived, and other title funds that we have reviewed thus far. So the purpose of Title IV Part A funds is to improve students' academic achievement by increasing the capacity of states, LEAs, schools, and local communities to do the following: provide all students with access to a well-rounded education, improve school conditions for student learning, improve the use of technology in order to improve the academic achievement and digital literacy of all students. For LEAs who received less than $30,000 in Title I Part A funds, these content areas and their spending requirements are not waived. However, for LEAs who received $30,000 or more in Title IV Part A funds, then the content area spending requirements are waived in the following ways. Typically, LEAs are required to spend not less than 20% of funds to support authorized activities that provide students with a well-rounded education, and also to spend not less than 20% of funds on authorized activities that improve school conditions for student learning. Additionally, LEAs are also typically required to use a portion of their funds toward activities that support the effective use of technology. Again, for LEAs who receive $30,000 or more in Title IV Part A funds, these requirements have been waived for fiscal year 2019 and any available fiscal year 2018 carryover funds. And potentially, the biggest change for LEAs who have received $30,000 or more in Title IV Part A funds is the waiving of the special rule under ESSA that states that an LEA may not use more than 15% of these funds to purchase technology infrastructure. However, with this waiver, LEAs who received Title IV Part A funds in the amount of $30,000 or more are granted authorization to use more than 15% of these funds to purchase technology infrastructure. Because the content area spending requirements and the technology infrastructure percentage limitations have been waived for these LEAs, LEAs are granted authorization to use these funds to purchase devices, equipment, software applications in order to address readiness shortfalls. Additionally, LEAs can use these funds to carry out blended learning projects, which include development of new instructional models, the purchase of digital instructional resources, and initial professional development activities. Finally, the third bullet, LEAs who receive $30,000 or more in Title IV Part A funds, the requirement to complete a needs assessment for the 2019-2020 school year has been waived. Please note, though, that it was only waived for the 2019-2020 school year, and therefore the 2020-2021 needs assessment has not been waived. We at CDE acknowledge that for some of you, many of you, these flexibilities will most likely change what you would like to report in CARS or how you would like to obligate your Title IV Part A funds. In our division, our program staff are already working with our colleagues in the Educational Data Management Division to finalize our plan for how we will reopen CARS so that those of you who would like to re-obligate your funds given these flexibilities can do so. CDE will be providing additional guidance within the coming weeks on how we plan to make these funds available given these flexibilities, which we will post on our program page and share through our listservs. Please, again, share your questions about Title IV Part A funds into the chat of our webinar today. And also, I have put an email address on this slide. Please do not hesitate to contact the Federal Programs Reporting Office. And their email regarding Title IV Part A is title4@cde.ca.gov. Thank you.
Okay, and in closing, we will discuss the LEA administrative use of title funds in response to COVID-19. The U.S. Department of Education provided questions and answers regarding compensation and the use of federal grants to pay for services that were not received due to the closure of schools during the COVID-19 emergency. Local education agencies may continue to pay the compensation of an employee paid with title funds during the period of the employee is unable to work due to COVID-19. They also may charge the compensation for employees according to LEA's policies and procedures for paying compensation under extraordinary circumstances, such as a public health emergency like COVID-19. LEAs need to follow the policies and procedures for paying compensation under these extraordinary circumstances. The link at the bottom of the screen will take you to this U.S. Department of Education document. Additionally, if a conference, training, or other activity charged to title funds are canceled due to COVID-19, grant funds may be used to reimburse non-refundable travel or registration costs that were properly chargeable at the time of booking. The LEA must first seek to recover non-refundable costs, for example, travel or registration fees. So in conclusion, the federal funding flexibility waiver communication and template can be found on the CDE ESSA webpage at www.cde.ca.gov/RE/ES/. The public comment period for the federal funding flexibility waiver is open through May 1st, 2020. And also any public comment can be emailed to essa@cde.ca.gov. We'll be taking all your comments, summarizing them, presenting them before the state board, and also sending them to the U.S. Department of Education. And finally, I ask if you can all stay connected to the CDE. Please check back regularly to our website as we're constantly updating it with valuable and timely information. To subscribe to this weekly update, you can also join the email list at join-covid19-update at mlist.cde.ca.gov. Also, if you can follow us on social media, on Facebook at CA Education and or on Twitter at CADEPT Ed for updates throughout the week. Thank you all for joining us today.
So as you all noticed on the invitation, we were scheduled to go until 11:30. However, you have all been just such a great audience at home that we have gotten through our content a little quicker than initially planned. So we will give all of you the gift of time. But what we would like to do is leave the chat open on Zoom for about 10, 15 more minutes to give all of you a really solid chance to capture your questions into that chat. As we have mentioned, we are going to archive all of these questions, and we are going to use them to inform our FAQs and also the next steps in how we share with all of you. So again, please don't hesitate to connect with us. We are here to support you as you support your students, which is the most important work that we can all do. Thank you all so much for your work during this uncertain time, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.